right, another game in the bag. More information, more ability to kind of like analyse a little bit more now. Starting to kind of understand what player profiles he wants in different positions more. And 4 goals, clean sheet. Obviously, that's good. Was it as clean cut? Was it a 4-0? Traditional 4-0? No. Amorim, as what's so refreshing, he's very honest in his post-match interviews. And Amorim said himself, like, the first 20, pretty much up until the goal, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, Everton were doing well. They were kind of causing danger, looking way more dangerous than what we were, keeping the ball. Possession was probably quite even, or if not, leading to them in that first kind of period. And then the goal obviously changes the game slightly. We started them to kind of keep possession a little bit more. We had something then to kind of hold on to, I guess, to then be able to go into a more passive possession shape, which is an effective shape to be able to kind of like get yourself into and be in that kind of like neutral, passive scenario. Maybe when you scored a goal, when you conceded a goal, just to kind of like calm things down a little bit. But I still feel that even at 1-0, things didn't just like drastically change at 1-0. I think it was the speed of 2 and 3 that obviously really did the damage, and then United got into a bit more of a flow of what we've been seeing in bits in games. And I think that's all positive. Again, this group of players, pretty much everyone was in agreement not too long ago that there's a certain level that this team have, and even after the Ipswich game, right, everyone was just reminding everybody else that there's a certain ceiling to this team, which there is. But as we will see, as the season carries on and as we go into next season, a lot of these players, there's so much more to get out of them. And a manager like Amorim, someone that understands the kind of modern day profile of a young 20 to 30-year-old dude, seems to be able to kind of like getting the most out of them. But yeah, I feel like interesting things at the beginning of somebody's tenure is when you start understanding what player profiles in what positions, right? Now, when this lineup here came out, I was like, right, are we going to see maybe Mainu in the 10? Yeah, and I thought you can still play Bruno deeper with Casemiro, and then play Mainu with Xerxes, and then maybe Rashford up top or whatever, right? I was trying to figure it out, because obviously this is quite a fluid. Players all of a sudden have different places where they can play this formation, which I feel like Ineos definitely spotted, right? They were like, I think that Ineos definitely. This is definitely Ineos' plan too, right? This is not just all Amorim in regards to how we're playing, because I feel like this squad was starting to get built towards that 3-4-3 or whatever, however you want to call it. But this lineup could have been many different, could have looked many different ways, right? Which is a testament to how Amorim's opened up the kind of options and all these different doors that can be opened in regards to formation and selection. But one of the, I think, the most important things to get out of that game was that we saw that Ahmad again was starting in that wing back role. So there's no danger now anymore of or any hope of him playing in these two kind of like 10 positions, which not for the moment anyway. But I feel like I always thought that we needed to see Ahmad higher up. So we can kind of see him in those central pockets, and he does so well in the half spaces. So play Ahmad further up, right? But in a sense, the way that kind of this ends up happening, say like Dallo has the ball on the left hand side, Ahmad pushes in or pushes up further, right? And then you do end up kind of just still, say if Rashford would be one making the runs in behind. You will end up a lot of times it kind of looking like that again. And that, do you know what I mean? So that ends up looking very similar to what these players are used to. So in different parts of these games, you will start getting this kind of like 4-3-3 scenario at times. Obviously, more so, it looks like a 4-2-2 in whatever kind of like configuration you want to get these players in. More so like this, but the idea being that there's always a offensive winger in this right wing back position. So you have one actual defender and one wing back. So Ahmad, who was just playing higher up than Dalot, he just ends up coming into a back four. And like Amorim said, it's fluid, right? There's just a lot of fluid different variations that happen during a game with most teams. We're just not used to it as United fans, right? For the longest time, this is the first time where we actually see some. We've been watching football morph and change, and tactics change, and the modernity of this new tactical kind of like era of football. And Man United have just been kind of sat there watching it go past them. And just playing in such like archaic ways, I feel, or pragmatic, one or the other. And this is the first time where it feels like we've kind of like caught up with just modern day football. Sadly, like, well, in a good way that we've actually got there. But how sad is it that it's taken this long? And just another thing to like back that up. Like, even I know heat maps aren't amazing, but if you look at so Ahmad here, like, is basically like either side of the halfway, like venturing into basically where he would be as a winger, and then Dalot is still in a more defensive shape, more so, picking up the ball in that left back zone way more than where Ahmad would be picking up the ball more on the halfway line. So it does kind of just show that we do kind of can sit into this a lot of the time. It looks like this, and if you look as well, Mazraoui is just like really pinned to the right back position almost. Mm-hmm. So we do end up kind of in this forward three-ish type scenario at times, which is not, again, so dissimilar to these players. So there are things that, and there are a lot of things in this formation that everyone obviously gets obsessed with, but there's a lot of things in this formation that the players will be comfortable with, though they would have been familiar with. There's a lot of different angles and stuff that probably are quite similar to when they were even playing that 4-3-3. But we do get there, and the way we get there, like I was saying, Rashford was obviously he's trying to make more runs in behind, so he then automatically would just kind of like pick up a position kind of more so alongside Xerxes, and Bruno was just playing slightly deeper. Ahmad in this position, so you start getting this 4-3-3 scenario happening a lot now, just because it's like, and one of the other things here is when things start being like squished in a bit more, right? So if we look at this kind of like setup here, where we would end up if the ball was maybe over. We do end up in this 4-2-2-2, right? This is the 4-2-2-2. I think Statman Dave spoke about it really well, but this is what kind of we end up in. But even in this 4-3-3 scenario, if Ahmad's kind of like creating width and actually getting into the front line, all it is a 4-3-3, but instead of these gaps being so bloody massive like they were under Ten Hag, where basically we were playing like this, everything was just so wide, and Bruno we'd be here, wouldn't we? This is what we would be like. And don't forget this guy, he'd be here. So this is what we'd be like under Ten Hag. Massive gaps. This poor soul, whoever it was in here, would just be getting ran around ragged. There was like no angles, no one for Dalot to play into. He'd go into Rashford, who had no one. He'd be pinned up against the touchline. It'd come back out, and it'd just be disgusting. Whereas now, when we're in this scenario, when we're in our shape, and then Dalot comes out with it, or whatever, Martinez comes out with it. My bad. Everyone tucks round. And then if Rashford's making that run, Bruno comes in, Ahmad makes that 4-2-2, or again, we are in more of this 4-3-3 shape. But look how kind of like together we actually are as a unit. So when the ball actually does come into Casemiro, or it comes into Bruno or Rashford, Rashford's in this half space, there's options, and we're playing, and we can actually be tighter and then make the pitch big when we need to, when we're in good possession. So it makes it harder to play through centrally. The one thing I feel like we're not doing yet is being able to pop the ball through the central areas, because I feel like just a lack of quality in those central areas with Bruno or Rashford and Garnacho. And when I mean lack of quality, I mean their strengths don't lie in picking the ball up in tight half spaces and playing really nice balls. Like that's Ahmad, Xerxes, Mainu. I'd even put Anthony in there ahead of Bruno, Rashford and Garnacho in actually being able to play in those tight half spaces. But yeah, all in all, like we're it's a nice steady uptake in performance, in like honesty from the players, whether that's like effort, honesty from the manager in terms of telling us what he wants and what actually he thought happened after the game. No gaslighting. So I feel like as fans, Man United fans are simple to please at the moment, and we're just getting used to simple things being done correctly. And as we build, and as we see that more holes, and also these scenarios are going to happen, I feel. So like against Everton at home, first 20 minutes, we're like, oh, we look pretty fragile. We're not really looking that dangerous. We're keeping the ball okay in certain areas, but quite passively, which is okay, but we weren't really doing much. So we had like that period of a sticky period at the beginning, and then we score goals. What will also happen is we'll go 1-0 up, and then we'll concede. Do you know what I mean? It'll go the other way around. We'll start really strongly, go a couple of goals up, and then we'll concede a couple of silly goals late or something, right? So there's going to be all these different ups and downs with all different scenarios happening. But yeah, all in all, players that were annoying are looking less annoying, and players that were kind of being held back and we felt like weren't getting the right shake, or we felt like they weren't seeing their potential, they're actually finally being played, like Ahmad's obviously, and things are looking good. Like in terms of signings now, the Xerxes people's had like an issue with Xerxes, especially like maybe his link-up play wasn't there in the first few appearances that he's played. The quality, I mean, I have no issue. I think he's a sick player. Like his quality, you see the quality instantly, and you're like, right, he's a 6'5" geezer. He needs it's a complete new manager instantly, new formation, and a whole new information instantly. Like within being at Man United for 4 or 5 months, then the whole thing just changes. So there's a lot of like things that he needs to get up to speed with, but he felt like he was fully there against Everton. And then now, if you look at the players that we signed, or Ineos have signed, so they signed Mazraoui, who's basically one of the best signings that we've done in recent times. And if you're on about value for money, Mazraoui's been an incredible signing. Delit's been solid as hell, and will be a continual starter for the team. I mean, Yoro was back. Now we're looking at Martinez as the one that's probably not going to play, right? Which, if before we signed a centre-back, you were like, the centre-back we signed will displace Martinez eventually, you'd be like, okay, well, that's obviously a good centre-back that we're signing. Yeah, and then Ugarte has shown the past like 3 or 4 games that he's played, and when he's come on, that he's he is basically a guaranteed should be 100% starting. And when we do settle down more into a starting 11, whenever that will be, maybe like after this Christmas craziness, Ugarte is number 1 midfielder on that team sheet. So all them signings were, and we were at 3 out of 4 for a lot of people, right? Or 2 out of 4 it was, right? And then Ugarte started playing well. Then they were at 3 out of 4. And I feel like we've made 4 solid as hell signings, And Ineos overseeing like a really like quick and really good turnaround. And this whole thing about it taking years and years for everything to change, and it's an absolute bollocks. This thing can be changed around very quickly with some good ideas, a healthy environment to operate in and to work in, and a modern way of thinking and playing that is completely unattached to this United DNA flying winger thing that's needed. But yeah, good showing. Some fragilities early on, but all in all good. Possession being used as a weapon again, and it's really nice to see just possession, and nice to be able to kind of work our way into good opportunities and good positional scenarios and overloads. But next game, big test, see where we're actually at. Be interesting to see who plays in those 2-10 positions. You'd imagine that Garnacho, he was, I suppose, saving for the Arsenal game, and it would be, you'd imagine he's going to play Bruno. It's going to be interesting. You can see him, I was going to say playing Bruno deeper and then playing Xerxes and Garnacho in the 2-10 positions, and then playing Højlund up top, because you'd imagine they'd want to play Højlund to kind of like for the pacing behind on the transition, right? But most likely he'll just play Casemiro, Ugarte as the 2 6s, and then he'll go Garnacho and Bruno, because Garnacho seems to be, again, it's one pacey player as the 10 and then Bruno. So he's playing Bruno and then Rashford or Garnacho in that other position, because he wants pace in behind from one of those players. So I think that's what we'll see. We'll see Garnacho and Bruno with Højlund. I think that's kind of his go-to, or that's the kind of rotation. That's what's happening at the moment. But yeah, we'll see. I think most likely we'll see a pretty tight game where we probably lose, like 2-1 maybe or something like that. Just because, I don't know, the level of probably the players that he's going to pick. He's going to play Garnacho most likely. He's going to play Højlund. I know Højlund scored a few goals, and now all of a sudden he's fucking actually decent or whatever. But I still am nowhere near sold on Højlund. Like, even though everyone looks better in Amorim, under Amorim, in Amorim, pause. Still yet to be sold on him. But we'll see. We'll see what Arsenal brings. If Rasmus plays against Arsenal and nets another couple of goals, or has a really great performance, and his link play improves, and he understands how to use his body, he understands how to get into some nice spaces to actually offer a good option. Yeah, then maybe you can start actually taking Rasmus like really, really seriously. But up until then, I feel like, probably Xerxes is a better option, in my opinion. But yeah, another City defeat. And it's interesting to see Guardiola kind of, how he's handling this. I know he's kind of like, he obviously he's taken basically the brunt of all of this on himself, and making it this kind of like in a dialogue. Whoa. Yeah, making this kind of like open dialogue in all these interviews, and it's basically talking about him and him and him. So he's taking the pressure off the players, I feel. Even though he probably does like talking about himself to a certain extent. I feel like, the main reason why he's constantly speaking about how he's going to deal with it and how he's got to do with it is he's taking the pressure off the players. It's just interesting how kind of, I feel like they just sold out. I feel like Man City were the only reason I can see them going so kind of like way bigger players, way more physical players, like bringing Gundo back, and then going with Doku and Savinho's a great player, to be fair, but he's like Doku, Haaland, the four centre backs at the back, like they moved to this more like physical natured team, and then they were relying on like Foden and who's obviously amazing, Bernardo, who is still probably amazing. He's just having a shit time of it. They were relying on these players heavily then to actually do something. Like the team, the treble team is Gundo and KDB, right? They're both done, finished. So it's a tricky one for them, really is. And I feel like, yeah, players are obviously what win you the titles most of the time, or what take you to that next level, right? You can only do with a group of players what you can do, but it still feels that the team that started, I feel like, should have done more, right? I feel like, and I don't think Liverpool are really that great. If Liverpool are the best team in Europe, like, they're good, but they're not great. And if that's the best team in Europe, man, it just shows how far football's gone, man.